Hi everyone, I'm Bianna Golodriga and this is Yahoo News Live. Terrorists strike again, this time in the capital city of the Western African country of Mali. Gunmen storming a popular hotel, taking as many as 170 hostages. The hostage situation is now over, but the UN is reporting at least 27 people are dead. As many as 15 Americans were known to be inside the hotel when the gunmen attacked. 6 have been recovered safely. Mark Toner is the U.S. State Department's deputy spokesperson. That's where he's joining us from this afternoon. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So, as we mentioned, the hostage situation is reportedly over. What does the State Department know right now about the situation in Mali, and were there any specific threats made to the region ahead of time?
Sure. All good questions. And frankly, the situation, even though the actual attack is over, as you mentioned, the situation still remains very fluid. We can confirm that all U.S. Embassy personnel are accounted for. We're still trying to account for all those American citizens who were at the hotel. You mentioned 6 being rescued. Even that number, frankly, is not certain at this point. We're still trying to determine the exact number of Americans who are there at the hotel and, frankly, how many have gotten out safely. And that's just, frankly, the way things are in these kinds of situations. It takes a little while. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of thirst and lots of questions out there and thirst for information. It just takes a while to sort through all the facts.
So the situation remains fluid. Were there any specific threats leading up to this attack? And do we know if this was ISIS related?
We don't. What we've seen so far is there has been an al-Qaeda-linked group that has claimed responsibility. Unclear to us whether that's valid or credible or not. Frankly, the investigation still needs to be conducted by the Malian government. We'll, of course, offer any assistance that we can through the FBI and other agencies. But it's still unclear at this point. I mean, look, Mali has had its own struggle and challenges with terrorists acting, mostly al-Qaeda affiliated, in some of the ungoverned spaces in Mali. It's done, frankly, a pretty good job at confronting that challenge. But, these threats remain, and we've talked a lot about it, whether it's Paris, whether it's Bamako, wherever it is, Beirut even, that the challenge of terrorism and predicting where the next terrorist attack may strike, it's difficult.
And, of course, you mentioned Paris. This comes 1 week after those horrendous attacks there. Well, 130 now were killed, including 1 American. What is the State Department advising Americans to do when it comes to traveling outside the U.S. and in Europe? Should they be concerned, especially as we're just about to kick off the busy holiday travel season?
Well, we should always be vigilant, and that's an important, I think, rule to remember. But we shouldn't be paralyzed by fear. We shouldn't cancel vacations. I mean, Americans should go abroad. We need to do business abroad. We need to take trips. We need to live our lives. But there are ways to be prudent about that and be vigilant. We always recommend that www.state.gov is the State Department website, and travel.state.gov. And what we do with those websites is we provide information to American travelers up to date, 24/7. And it's the same information, frankly, that we share among ourselves or with our own staff and people. As soon as we learn about relevant information involving security, we make that known to the American public. We're responsible to do that. It's our duty. We take the security of Americans abroad very, very seriously. It's our highest priority, in fact. But again, we don't want to tell Americans that they shouldn't travel, that they shouldn't do business abroad. We all need to do that. Otherwise, if we succumb to fear, as you often said, the terrorists would win.
Right. And as we know, Paris's economy has already taken a significant hit, especially its hospitality sector. I want to turn to politics now because, of course,
Sure.
this terrorist attack has become a political issue here at home. Hillary Clinton yesterday used some of her harshest rhetoric yet in terms of combating ISIS, saying that she would impose a no-fly zone, potentially put more troops on the ground, and says that the mission should be to defeat and destroy ISIS, not to contain them. Some view this as a direct shot at the president's own language. Do you?
Not necessarily. I mean, the president was very clear about this when he spoke in Turkey earlier this week and subsequently in Asia. We do have a strategy in place. Of course, we're going to accelerate. We're going to amplify our efforts. And we're also going to focus on what is working on the ground. let's not forget, this is only a year old, this counter-ISIL strategy. We built a coalition of more than 65 countries to combat ISIL or ISIL or Daesh, however you refer to it. We are having an effect. As the president said, the secretary has said, Daesh controls 25% less territory than they did last year. We're effectively supplying and supporting groups on the ground, both in Iraq as well as in northern Syria, that are able to confront and to defeat Daesh where it holds territory. Look at, for example, the Kurdish Peshmerga in just this past week in Sinjar province in Iraq. They made gains. They retook ground that was held by ISIL. But it's a different thing to say that alone will take care of the terrorist threat posed by ISIL. ISIL has said they're going to target the West. We recognize that. Again, the president was very clear here. We have to remain vigilant. We have to assume the worst and always try to disrupt these networks as much as we can beforehand. But it's, frankly, it's unfortunate, but we all live under a continuous threat of terrorism.
And of course, one of the consequences of the conflict in the region is the millions of migrants and refugees who are fleeing, and that's become an issue here at home as well. What is the State Department's reaction to the vote yesterday in Congress to stop the Syrian refugee resettlement that included, by the way, 47 Democrats? The president has threatened to veto the bill, but given that so many Democrats voted in favor of it, do you think that signals at least a disconnect between the president's view and the American public? 53% of those polled agree with the majority of the House.
Well, look, what I'd say to that is it's somewhat understandable in the wake of the terrorist attacks in Paris that American governors, politicians would be, and Americans would be concerned about the refugee process. But there's a lot of misinformation out there about how these refugees come into the country and who they are. These refugees, only a small fraction of who are from Syria. But these refugees are vetted more than any other traveler coming into the United States. It's a process that takes 18 to 24 months, involves multiple agencies, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the National Counterterrorism Center. All of these vet these refugees as they come in. That's important to understand that. Sorry, just go ahead.
Well, I want to interrupt you there because this is an issue I think a lot of us are frustrated over. Specifically, myself, I'm a political refugee who came to this country, was fortunate enough to come to this country 35 years ago. The wait time was only 6 months to come to this country. And I think a lot of people say the president may have dropped the ball as far as talking to the American public and reassuring them that there is a vigorous process going on here. And the speculation that we're hearing left, right, and center shouldn't be if, in fact, we did hear from people like the president, people like yourself, that this were the steps that were taken to prevent terrorists from coming into this country.
So all good questions and all good points. So what we're doing we absolutely recognize that we need to get out and explain better to the American people how this process looks. And the fact that, and we've spoken to this, the president quite eloquently has spoken to this, these refugees are often the victims of terrorism, of war, of conflict. They are seeking safety and security. It speaks to who we are as Americans, to be perfectly frank, that we open our arms, open our country, open our borders to these people. That said, we are mindful that our highest priority is the security of the American people. So rest assured, we stand by the process that is in place now. And as you noted, it is a long process, 18 to 24 months. But we stand by that process as the best measure to get these individuals, these families, into the United States so that they can restart their lives and begin anew. But you're right. We need to engage, and we've already been engaging with governors, with politicians, with local community organizers throughout the country to explain the process, to explain who these people are, and to do a better job to answer their questions, which are somewhat understandable. But again, we stand by the process. Since 2011, over 2,000 Syrians have come into the country. We want to see at least 10,000 in the next fiscal year. We recognize that there's a need to help these people out.
And some would say that the vacuum of engagement with the public has opened the door to vitriol, and you've heard it, the public xenophobia from Republican candidates like Donald Trump and Dr. Ben Carson comparing refugees to rabid dogs, and Trump saying that he would create a database to track all of the Muslims in the U.S. Yet, they're still leading in the polls, these two men. What is the State Department's response to that?
Well, look, as I said, there's a lot of misinformation out there about these refugees, who they are, what they're fleeing, how they get processed to come into the United States. Again, I just would refer to what I just said, which is, think about who we are as Americans. We open our doors to immigrants. Many of us, as you just mentioned about yourself, are the sons and daughters of immigrants or the grandsons and granddaughters of immigrants. That is who we are. The vast majority of Americans can trace their heritage to immigrants coming to this land. It speaks to who we are as Americans. That said, we have a process in place that ensures that there are security measures that ensure the safety of these people coming to our shores. They are vetted. They are subject to the highest level of security clearance of any traveler to the United States. We need to do a better job of conveying that to the American public.
And Mark, experts I've spoken to said that they're more concerned about a direct threat from those coming to the U.S. as tourists or with travel visas than even those refugees who have to go through, as we mentioned, the lengthy vetting process. What about that issue? And what about those people not coming from Syria or the Middle East, but from Europe, Australia, Asia? You're relying on their security databases. And as we saw in France, they can't always be relied upon.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not relying solely on their databases. So and you're referring to visa-free travel. Any traveler coming to the United States, even those eligible from France or from other countries that are eligible for visa-free travel, they have to, again, undergo a security review. It's a computerized database that checks their names and checks their travel data against a database of security information that we have that helps identify potential threats or potential terrorists. This is for every incoming traveler to the United States. It's not like they just get on a plane and arrive in New York or wherever. It just doesn't work that way. That said, again, we have to all be vigilant. Not only the State Department and the consular officials overseas who vet these people, but here at home, our domestic agencies, DHS and others, law enforcement, who have to identify or follow up, threat information, credible information. It is a 24/7 process, and we can't let our guard down. That is, unfortunately, the reality of the world we live in.
And finally, Mark, French President Hollande is traveling to Washington next week to meet with the president, followed by a trip that he's taking to Russia to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin, all with the hopes of putting together a coalition to fight ISIS. Will the president acquiesce to one of our oldest allies, even if that means putting plans to oust Assad on hold right now?
Well, we do have a process in place, and frankly, Secretary Kerry here at the State Department has been front and center on coalescing that group. And it does include France. It includes a number of what we call stakeholders, and that group includes Russia and Iran. And we took some heat for inviting them. But Secretary Kerry was very clear in that we needed them at the table to find a way forward. Look, we understand there's two pieces to the puzzle of Syria to ending the conflict there. One is Daesh or ISIL, whatever you call them, and defeating and destroying them. The other is the ongoing conflict and civil war that President Assad is raging against the Syrian people. And that, we said, does not have a military solution to it. That needs to be a political process. Now, you know where we stand on Assad. We want to see him. We don't see him as a credible leader. We don't see him as part of Syria's future. But what we also been clear about is we don't want to let that be an obstacle to moving forward on a political process that leads to a transitional government for Syria. So we're working with Russia, we're working with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, other players in the region to try to develop a way forward. We just had a meeting last week in Vienna. We're going to have upcoming meetings, but we want to see a political process put in place, and then we want to see a credible ceasefire to end the fighting. Once that's taken out of the equation, Russia, France, all of the coalition partners, those in the region, we can then focus solely on destroying ISIL. and that's really the main focus. And everyone agrees they are an existential threat.
Mark Toner, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend and happy holidays.
Thanks so much. You too.
And we always look forward to hearing what you have to say. You can follow me on Twitter at Bianna Golodryga and use hashtag Yahoo Live to let us know what you think about the debate surrounding Syrian refugees and the continuing fight against ISIS. I'm Bianna Golodryga. Thanks for watching.